Seriously, Grandma, you made this, with your hands. Her voice snapped through the room like a cracked plate. She wasn't smiling, she was smirking, and then she said it, loud, clear. This is cheap. I was still standing there, both hands wrapped around the little wooden box I'd spent 3 weeks making. I'd carved her name on the lid. Lined the inside with a swatch of silk from my old wedding dress. Polished it so carefully the corners gleamed like glass. It was a graduation gift, from me to her. Something real, something from my soul. But she, my granddaughter, all dolled up in her red dress, her eyelash extensions fluttering like butterfly wings. She held the box like it smelled bad. And the worst part, she said it right in front of everyone. The whole living room had gone still, except for Carla, her mother, my daughter-in-law. She snorted into her wine glass, didn't even try to hide it. The two of them giggled like it was some inside joke, like I was the punchline. I heard a chair creak to my left. Jacob, my son. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at his plate. Didn't say a word. No one did. Forks clinked. Someone cleared their throat. A cousin somewhere coughed into her drink. But not one person said anything. No one defended me. No one said, "Hey, that was out of line." Not even a whisper of thank you from the girl I once held through colic and chickenpox. I smiled. Not because I was fine, but because it was all I had left to do. I set the box down on the table beside her, still smiling. Then I picked it back up, still smiling, folded the silk over it, tucked it under my arm, and turned toward the hallway. No one stopped me, no one called out, but one pair of eyes did follow me. From the corner by the stairs, my younger grandson, still in his church shoes, cradling a juice box, wide-eyed. He didn't say a word, but I saw it. He understood something had just broken in that room. And right before I reached the door, I turned my head just slightly, leaned toward my granddaughter, and said quietly, only for her, "Congratulations, sweetheart, you just made your most expensive mistake." I walked out into the night, no coat, no keys, just that box in my hands. And a heart that had just been told it was worthless. But I wasn't angry. Not then. Not yet. Because I knew something they didn't. Something they had forgotten about where they lived. About how they paid for college. About who, all this time, had been silently holding the walls of their world in place. And I knew one more thing they were about to feel. What cheap really looked like. You don't start out carving wooden boxes. You start out learning to fix broken things. And before I ever learned how to sand a corner smooth, I learned how to put a family back together with nothing but my bare hands, and a heart that refused to quit. Jacob was 5 when his father left. No long goodbye, just a crumpled note on the kitchen counter, and a silence that screamed through every room of our house. I remember holding my boy that night, his head tucked beneath my chin, his fists balled up tight in my sweater and whispering, "We're gonna be okay, I promise." I didn't believe it then, but I said it anyway, because that's what mothers do. I cleaned houses by day, took overnight shifts at the hospital laundry, knitted hats to sell on Sundays at the church fair. I stretched every dollar until it squealed, refused to let my son wear the shame of poverty on his back. He had shoes, always clean. He had lunch, even if mine was just coffee and breath mints. He had birthdays. Though sometimes the cake was just cornbread with powdered sugar, he never knew the lights were almost cut off, or that the rent was late more times than I care to admit. I made sure he didn't know. I wanted him to feel like a boy, not a burden. And when he brought home Carla, sweet-faced Carla with her high heels and quiet, calculating eyes, I welcomed her like a daughter. I gave them the house, literally gave it, moved into a studio apartment over a florist's shop, said I needed a change of pace. Though my knees ached every time I climbed those stairs, I never said no to watching the kids. I picked up my granddaughter from ballet, helped her make dioramas from cardboard, sewed little sequins onto her Halloween costumes by hand. She used to call me Mama too. I still remember the first time she said it. She was sitting at my kitchen table with jelly on her cheeks, swinging her feet under the chair, and she looked up and said, "When I get big, I'm gonna take care of you. Mama too." I smiled. And I believed her, even when Carla started pulling away. Started saying things like, "She doesn't need to be spoiled with your old-fashioned gifts." Or, "She needs to understand class." She'd roll her eyes when I brought over homemade dresses, hide her designer bags whenever I visited, and whisper to her daughter things she thought I couldn't hear. "You don't need to wear that. That's not what rich girls wear." I never pushed back. I didn't want to start a war, didn't want to make Jacob choose. But the shift came slowly, and then all at once. My granddaughter stopped hugging me at the door, stopped sitting in my lap, started calling me grandma with a tone that sounded more like a formality. She still took the gifts, but I noticed she never wore the sweater I spent a month knitting, never displayed the photo frame I carved from walnut wood. She posted pictures of her new boots, her name-brand purses, her dream life. But I was never in those photos, and still I kept saving. Every Christmas. I tucked a little extra into a special fund, started it the day she was born, marked it in a red folder, college, emergency only. It had my name on it, only mine. They didn't even know it existed. I didn't tell them about the night I sold my engagement ring, didn't tell them the reason I never fixed my broken washing machine. I didn't tell them that when I saw my granddaughter's name on her acceptance letter to the university, I cried, alone, because I thought, I helped build this. I helped make this happen. I even started carving the box right then, from a piece of cherry wood I'd saved since the day she was born. It had a soft grain, took to the blade like butter. I carved her initials, lined the inside with silk from my old wedding dress, tied it with the same ribbon that once held her baby bonnet. I told myself, this is love, not money, not flash, just love. And I prayed she would see it. That's the thing about sacrifice. It's quiet. It doesn't ask for applause. It just hopes that someday someone will notice what it cost, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they laugh instead. There's a certain kind of silence that follows humiliation. It's not peace. It's not quiet. It's that numb, frozen air you feel when everyone saw. And no one said a thing. After I walked out of that room with the box under my arm, no one came after me. Not Jacob. Not Carla. Not the granddaughter I once called my miracle. I didn't cry in the car. Didn't scream or curse or shake my fists at the sky. I just sat there, hands still on the wheel, watching the porch light blink off as if the house itself was finished with me. The next morning, I left a pie on their front step, pecan, her favorite. No note, no message, just one last offering. Old habits die hard, but by noon, it was still there, untouched, ants crawling along the crust. 3 days later, I got a text from Jacob. It said, "Don't take it personally. Mom, you know how teenagers are." I stared at that sentence so long the screen dimmed. Not even her name. No apology, no acknowledgement that his daughter humiliated me in my own house. A week passed, then 2. No one called. No one visited. I baked a batch of her favorite cinnamon rolls, wrapped them in foil, left them at the door again, gone the next morning, but no thank you. Not even a nod. That's when I started to notice the distance had stopped being temporary. I used to be the one they called when the boys needed to be picked up from school, when Carla needed someone to help fold laundry, when Jacob had a business trip and someone had to stay overnight. Now nothing. I found out about the college decision on Facebook. Through a post Carla tagged her daughter in. A picture of the two of them holding a school hoodie. Captioned, "So proud of my baby." She did it all on her own. That sentence hit me harder than the word cheap ever did, because I knew what that sentence was meant to erase. I was the one who researched schools, helped fill out the FAFSA, opened the college savings account, skipped new shoes for 3 winters so that account could grow. She didn't do it on her own, but no one was going to say that part out loud. Still, I kept my distance, hoped space would make hearts softer, make them realize. But then came the dinner, family only, a small celebration before she left for college. I wasn't invited. I found out about it from the mailman. He'd seen the balloons through the window, asked me what the occasion was, and I just smiled, said, just a regular Tuesday, I guess. The night of the dinner. I stood outside their house for a few minutes. I don't know why I went. Maybe I thought I'd catch Jacob in the driveway. Maybe I thought someone would see me from the window, wave me in. But all I saw were silhouettes, shadows clinking glasses, laughter floating out through the cracks in the old wooden frame I'd once repaired with my own hands, that night. I sat at home and opened the red folder, the one labeled College, Emergency Only, and I read every page, every deposit slip, every note to myself, little scribbles from years past. Keep going, this matters. Even if they forget, you won't. Love louder than they can erase. I held the last check in my hand, the one I'd written just weeks ago, and I didn't shred it. Not yet, but I did put it in a new folder, a different one, labeled Plan B. 2 days later. I got a call from Carla, not Jacob, not the girl. Carla. Her voice was sugary sweet, too sweet. Hi, Mom. We were just wondering if you could still come by and drop off the tuition check. The deadline's this Friday. I paused. She kept talking. I know things have been tense, but I think we should just move past all that drama. Don't you family's more important than a little misunderstanding? I could hear the party still echoing in her voice, the smugness, the assumption that I'd still come running. I took a slow breath and said, Oh, Carla, I agree. Family is important. There was a smile in my voice. She must have heard it because she relaxed, even chuckled. So you'll bring it? I let the silence stretch, then replied, No. Silence. Dead. Flat. Stunned. Excuse me, you heard me. No, but she needs it. This is her future. She made her choice, and so did you. She started yelling, something about betrayal, about how I was punishing a child, how I was taking away everything. And I said, very calmly, no. I'm just taking back what was mine to begin with. She hung up on me. But I stayed on the line for a while, listening to the silence that followed her absence. It was a different kind of silence, not numb, not cold. This one had peace in it. I looked at the check one last time, and finally I smiled. Because for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel cheap. I felt certain. You see, the thing about being quiet all your life is that people start thinking you're weak, forgettable, replaceable. They think silence means surrender, but silence can also mean strategy. The morning after Carla hung up on me, I poured myself a cup of tea, opened my laptop, and went to work. Not with anger, not out of spite, just precision. The first thing I did was call the bank. The account I had built brick by brick. Dollar by dollar was under my name alone, as I always intended. I transferred the full balance out, moved it into a private fund I'd marked Plan B, then revoked any prior authorization they didn't even know I'd once considered giving. I didn't tell them. They'd find out soon enough. Next, I opened a file I hadn't looked at in years. Property deeds. Tucked neatly behind a photocopy of a letter my husband had written to me, the last good thing he left behind before disappearing. Back then. The house my son and Carla were living in was about to be sold for debt. Jacob had made some poor choices. Business ventures that turned to dust, and instead of letting them drown, I stepped in. Quietly bought the house out from under foreclosure, signed the deed in my name, told them they could stay. No rent needed, until they got back on their feet. That was 12 years ago. They never asked again, and I never reminded them. But now I emailed a copy of the deed to a lawyer, a very calm, very sharp woman named Ellen. We'd met at a community workshop on estate planning. She wore thick-rimmed glasses and never spoke more than she had to. I liked that about her. I explained the situation. And she nodded slowly on the video call. Do you want to evict them? She asked. Plainly. I hesitated. Not because I wasn't sure, but because I knew what it would mean. I wasn't just asking for space. I was asking for respect. No, I said. Not yet. Then what's the plan? I smiled, a different kind of smile. I want you to deliver a letter, on paper, in person, at a time I choose. She nodded once. That was all I needed. The following Friday, the deadline for tuition payments, they held another small gathering. A farewell dinner. Just family. Before the girl left for college. I wasn't invited. Again. But I showed up anyway. Not alone. Ellen came with me. She wore black slacks and a gray blazer, and carried a white envelope. We arrived 5 minutes before dinner. Not fashionably late, just inconvenient enough to be noticed. Jacob opened the door. His smile froze. His eyes darted behind him, where I could see champagne glasses being passed. Mom? What are you doing here, just stopping by? Carla appeared over his shoulder, her voice tight. We weren't expecting company. Clearly, I said, handing Ellen the envelope. Ellen stepped forward, calm as ever. You're being formally notified that the college fund account associated with your daughter has been permanently dissolved. Carla blinked. What? You can't just... Furthermore, Ellen continued, unfazed. This letter contains updated terms regarding your tenancy in the home you're currently occupying. That word tenancy hit like a brick through stained glass. You have 30 days to vacate. The owner has decided to reclaim full possession of the property. Wait, what do you mean, the owner? Jacob asked. Stunned. Your mother, Ellen said, gesturing to me, is the sole legal owner of the house. Title, mortgage, taxes, all paid in full. By her. The room behind them had fallen quiet. I could see my granddaughter in the dining room, standing in her heels, frozen, her lip gloss catching the chandelier light. Carla's voice rose. You're doing this now at her farewell dinner. I stepped forward and I said it calmly. No. Carla, I did this the moment she called me cheap. There was a hush, a real one, not the kind laced with tension, just stillness. You treated me like an ATM, like a dusty extra in your perfect little show. You let her laugh at me. Shame me. Ignore everything I've done for this family. You fed her the lie that money makes people valuable, and handmade love is disposable. Jacob looked pale. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to reclaim what's mine, and to remind you that silence is not the same as weakness. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't slam the door, didn't toss any last words over my shoulder. Didn't need to. They had everything they needed in that envelope. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt taller. Not because I won, but because I finally stood up. It started with the neighbors, 3 houses down. Mr. Kaplan asked Jacob, hey, saw a real estate lawyer at your door last week. Everything okay? Then it was Carla's friend from the gym. You moving out of that big place, I thought you bought it years ago. Word traveled fast in our neighborhood, not because people were cruel, but because people notice when a family that flaunted so much suddenly falls silent. Jacob didn't respond to the comments, not at first. But I heard from a friend at the local pharmacy that he'd stopped coming in for Carla's specialty teas. He looked thinner, tired, like a man trying to undo years of passive choices with one exhausted conscience. As for Carla, well, she tried to keep up appearances. For about a week, she hosted a brunch on the second Saturday after the notice, invited a few close friends, took pictures of avocado toast and mimosa flutes on the patio, but behind her smile, you could see it panic. Desperation disguised as grace, because the truth was, they couldn't afford the market rent in that neighborhood. Not even close. They'd spent years upgrading kitchens and wardrobes, not saving, living in a house they never truly owned, because they never stopped to ask who had quietly kept the roof over their heads. They thought I was old-fashioned, outdated, someone who gave and gave because she had nothing else to offer. They didn't realize I had more than enough to give, and more than enough to take back. By the 3rd week, Carla stopped going to Pilates. The brunch pictures stopped. The posts about success and hustle turned into generic quotes about new beginnings. I didn't feel cruel. I felt measured. And yet, I didn't rejoice. There's no joy in watching your own son pack boxes. There's no pride in seeing your granddaughter's shoulders slump when she walks out the front door for the last time. But there is peace. And sometimes peace is louder than any apology. They moved into a rental apartment across town, a small 2-bedroom on the second floor of a noisy building that didn't allow dogs. Jacob called me the day they moved in. His voice cracked. I didn't know the house was yours. I stayed quiet for a moment. You never asked. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to help. Not humiliate. There was silence. Then quietly, she didn't mean it. The cheap comment. She's young. She was old enough to cash checks with my name on them. He didn't argue. Instead, he said the one thing I never expected. I think I let her believe that what she said was okay, because I never stood up for you. My throat tightened. I didn't say. Yes, you did. I didn't say. It's too late. I just said you still have time to stand up. Not for me. For her. Teach her what real value looks like. As for Carla, she never called, but she did send an email. It was stiff, formal. Not quite an apology, but something close enough to count in her world. She wrote, I understand your decision. I only hope we can rebuild some level of trust if not for us. Then for the children. I read it twice. Didn't respond. Sometimes. Silence is the most honest answer we have. The college she went, not the school she'd wanted, but one with decent scholarships and a work-study program. She didn't post about it, didn't announce it with confetti or branded hoodies, just packed her bags quietly and left. I found out from the younger grandson. He came by one afternoon with a lopsided drawing and a question. Grandma, why didn't you come to her going-away dinner? I smiled gently. Because she didn't invite me. Sweetheart. He looked down. Ashamed. I wanted you there. I hugged him tight, because in that moment, I knew something they didn't. You can lose a house. You can lose a title. Even a scholarship. But the love of a child, one who still sees you, still believes in your hands, and the stories they hold, that's a kind of justice too. I never said, I told you so. I never shouted, look who was right. Because that's not who I am. Justice isn't always thunder and gavel slams. Sometimes it's the quiet closing of a front door and the knowledge that, this time, you walked out on your terms. These days, I wake up to quiet, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. There's no clatter of dishes I didn't dirty, no distant arguments behind closed bedroom doors. No sharp heels tapping across hardwood floors like I was just the background help in my own home. Instead, it's birdsong and the creak of my porch swing when I bring out my tea. I live in a small cottage now, 2 towns over, just enough space for one soul and all the peace she deserves. I've planted tomatoes, hung wind chimes by the kitchen window, and every Thursday morning, I volunteer at the community library reading stories to little ones whose eyes still light up at magic. One of them asked me recently, "Did you ever have a princess dress?" I laughed, then said, "I didn't need one." I learned how to build castles out of silence. He didn't understand the metaphor, but he hugged me anyway, and that was enough. I still keep the wooden box, the one they once called cheap. It sits on my shelf. Next to a photo of Jacob when he was 7, missing his front teeth, holding up a popsicle stick picture frame we made together. Funny how those tiny things outlast the gold-trimmed ones. Funny how time has a way of peeling back the noise and leaving only what matters. To the mothers out there, the grandmothers, the aunts, sisters, caretakers, silent builders, I see you. I know how it feels to be overlooked, to pour love into hands that never look back, to make something with your heart only to have it dismissed because it doesn't come in shiny packaging. But listen to me, your love is not cheap, your hands are not outdated, and your silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's strength, wrapped in gentleness, and it is never too late to take back your worth, to choose peace, to stand tall, even if your voice shakes, to say, no more, without needing to shout. If you've ever been made to feel small for giving something real, I hope you know now they didn't reject you. They rejected what they couldn't understand, and that's on them, not you. So tell me, have you ever been called too much or not enough? Have you ever made a gift with your own two hands and had it laughed at, ignored, thrown aside? If you have, share your story below. Let's remind each other what love really looks like, not in labels, but in labor, not in logos, but in the lines we carve through time. And if this story meant something to you, send it to someone who needs to hear it. A daughter, a friend, a version of you. 5 years ago, still holding back tears at a family dinner table. Because you are not alone. You are not forgotten. And you are never too old to reclaim your voice.